I mean, that turn stuff on the lathe is fun. Most content and life was easiest for us as a family is when I was building things. I was about as ADHD as you could get as a kid back before they had that term. The stuff that we built was good. But you know, we didn't make any money. It was like, I don't know how we ate. It was just ridiculous. I look back on it thinking, oh my gosh, what a joke.
Yo, what's up guys? This video is going to be a little different today. Well, we were just doing the same stuff that we were doing last week. We had a couple more doors to glue up, a couple more jams to go together. And instead of showing you the same thing that we did last week, we're going to do a little interview with Rowdy, and you can learn a little bit about him and his woodworking journey. So yeah, we'll get into that. We were supposed to do a van build out. I'm kind of spilling the beans on that this week, but that's not going to be, not next week, the following week. For a builder that I work for, we're going to outfit this van that he just bought, so it's like a mobile office, so it'll be really sick. So this week's going to look a little different, but we will have stuff going on in the shop. But yeah, let's get into this interview with Rowdy.
More slivers in my hands from just this morning. I mean, come on. Well, Rowdy Morgan, it's Edwin Rowdy Morgan, but I was born in Seattle, raised in a little town called Port Orchard. It's across the water from Seattle on the peninsula in Washington. Lived there till I was like 12, and then moved to Crescent City. My dad got real sick, had some heart attacks. He was coaching a baseball team. They were on their way to the Senior Babe Ruth Olympics, and he had a heart attack out in Montana, and we didn't see him for a year. It was way back before any open heart surgery had ever been done, and so it took them a year to transfer him back hospitals to get to Bremerton and then home. I was at the beginning of my 8th grade year in Crescent City, a little tiny town on the coast, Northern California, at the middle school level, didn't have football, and that was kind of my gig. So my parents and everybody, my older brother who was in high school, moved down to California, and I stayed up there in Washington with my aunt and uncle until football season was over, because they lived right by the middle school. Or back then it was a junior high. So then came to Crescent City, and in the 8th grade I met the young lady that is now my wife. We've been best of friends ever since. 40, how many years is that? 48 years ago?
Better remember that.
Oh, more than that. Gosh, a long time ago. Ended up my first real employment. Well, the whole time, even from high school, even my freshman year, my shop teacher, Mr. Bieber, ended up hiring me on and off to do different things. I was a 3-sport athlete, and that condensed down just to 2 sports as I got in the middle of high school. But whenever I could, I worked for him and my other shop teacher, Mr. Bosch, and Mr. Rakestraw. I worked for all those guys doing different things.
So what was your first, they're your shop teacher, so then what was your first experience with woodworking?
So it was with them, and then I've always had kind of a knack, even in junior high in Washington. It was, there was just something that was drawn. And so I was hyperactive, and they could still swat you in school, so I was a daily recipient of the paddle. I mean, it was all they could do to corral me. First stuff I started doing in shop was I made a cribbage board out of a myrtle wood burl, and then I made a bowl, black walnut bowl, turned on the lathe. Most people were having to do required projects to, show teachers your abilities. And I did those pretty quick, but mostly I did it pretty accurately. So they're going, and then I would help people. And finally I talked to Mr. Bieber, and it was like, hey, kid, I'd like to do something else. And so he let me. He said, okay, well. So I ended up just doing a lot of stuff. It was all stuff made, maybe a cutting board or a cribbage board or turning the black walnut bowl on the lathe. I still have the bowl. I'll give it to my mom. It's 16 inches across.
And that they let you do that in shop class.
Oh, yeah.
With a black walnut burl.
I don't know if you remember. we talked exactly. It's still down at the bottom of the shelf of the cutting board island I made my mom.
Right.
But, yeah, so it was just doing stuff in the shop classes. Then I would end up TAing as I got older and take a class or take a construction class in high school, which was, that was with Mr. Bieber as well. It was really fun. It was a good thing. But those things stuck with me. When I went off to college, I thought, well, because I loved to hunt, I well, I'm going to be a gunsmith. That's a good thing. Started looking where we're going to go. Realized that that's East Coast stuff, not West Coast, and that I could figure out. And I wasn't going to the East Coast. I don't think at that point I'd probably ever been to Nevada. Jenny and I had figured out what colleges we thought we could go to, and we ended up at Shasta College, junior college in Reading. And I thought, well, I'm going to just be a carpenter. That's what I'm doing now, building and making stuff. And great, but then on break, I'd go home, or at any time we had a chance to go back to Crescent City where Jenny's family was. I ended up running into these guys that mentored me, Jerry Smith. He said, hey, you don't, if you want to, and Bill Hartwick, guy I worked for a whole bunch, my buddy Kevin's dad. His whole thing was, if you're going to be a carpenter, just be a carpenter. Don't go to school for it. That's just a waste of money. You can do it now. Just be a contractor. You could do that. Kevin and I had a construction company in high school. It's called Mortwick Construction. Still have the magnets for our doors. We did it under his dad's license. He kind of governed everything. We built a couple of houses. Went up on the airport in Crescent City. I was 16 years old, 17 years old. Anyway, they said, no, Jerry Smith said to me, if you're going to do this, and Steve Schellebarger too, said, if you need to teach. That's what you need. You need to be a teacher. You got the right personality, you got the right thing. I thought, I'm going to be a teacher. Why? They said so, that's why. And then finally set my major. Back then it was industrial arts. And so you had to take enough classes in auto and in metals, and fabrication and cabinets and construction, just different. So you had a nice wide smattering of skills, so you could, if you applied for a job and something was open, you could do most things. Josh, it's funny. Back in the day, and it's still this way today, most people will say those who can do, those who can't teach. And I remember hearing that back then, and I thought, no, we'll see about that, I've always prided myself in being a guy that works pretty hard, and I've always somehow coupled myself with somebody that somehow works harder than me. Yeah, the guy, I think I'm just kicking it, just crushing it, and he's just putting me to shame. It's like, and I can't let that happen. I'm just competitive enough to where you gotta pick up your pace. I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna saw something off if I go any faster, But I've gotten so fortunate to have people like that who are really good at what they do, understand what they're doing, and they're not pushy in any way, and able to deal with my own foibles of whatever I do that's kind of screwy. Hey, why not this way? Good idea. With you, I say, yeah, that's a good idea today. That's one, but there's a lot of those that stack up. The good news is typically in my life, I've been able to, I'll see something like that and I'll kind of remember it. Oh, that's a lot faster, or that's a lot cleaner. And so as I was going through life, I just was able to come up with those things, and they have a tendency to stick. If it's something you'd like to do, those things will stick. Or if you're around people that you respect, they have something to say, they stick. So all the way through, worked in residential treatment with my wife for about 5 years, working with kids that had already been removed from homes and needed mental health counseling and needed a stable environment. After that, got my first teaching position up in Quincy, California, teaching woods and math, cabinets and math. And then after that, moved up to the Rogue Valley in Oregon, where I was teaching metals and woods and architectural drafting. That was a high school. When I was up in Quincy, it was junior, senior, so it was 7th through 12. I got to coach a couple sports there too, which is fun. Great place to be a young man, a young family. Had 2 of our kids started there, and then we moved to Rogue Valley. And then I have family, and I was really close to Jenny's family over on the coast, California coast. So it's kind of a nice little place to reset ourselves. And I was teaching there initially, and then I went back and got a master's degree so that I could do counseling in school, since we were doing that initially in residential. Got a position at a middle school in Rogue River as a dean of students, and then I got a position in Medford with that buddy of mine, Kevin, who was a dean of students, and so we were both deans, and just kept moving. Got another master's so I could become an administrator. I'm not sure that was the best move I've ever made, but it was. I was asked to, and I said, yeah, I could do that. I'll do that. And then it just, 33 years later, it's like, okay, think I've had enough.
So the last time you were teaching wood class or
Oh,
wood
gosh.
shop, how long ago was that?
27 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a little bit rusty. Been a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in that time, did you have like your own shops at
Always in
home?
my
Something similar?
garage.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't really call it a shop like what you have here. Not even close. I accumulated tools over time and built things, router tables or router stations or whatever, and I'd do things. But where I fell back on was mostly residential construction because it doesn't take much.
Right.
You need a skill saw, you need squares, but you don't need a lot of the stuff you need if you're going to make cabinets or be competitive making cabinets. So I always did projects, even when I was even an administrator. I just did stuff. I always did.
So for you had access to probably some pretty decent shops. Like when you were teaching,
Well,
that
when I
like
was teaching, yeah, I had access in California. It was really had access shop, but in Oregon, it was very different. In fact, I took most of my tools and brought it to the shop and set
okay.
stuff up in there because it was just it's a. I think they've gotten a really great name right now, but Rogue River back in the day, it was tough. It was a tough position. Both shops were in tough shape, and they've probably done a much better job with them now. First day I got to Quincy, there were people in there using the shop. And I just kind of said, hey, and they kind of waved, hey, and I don't know you don't know who I am. I just moved to town. I just thought maybe I'd check out the wood shop that I'm going to be taking care of. And these were old retired teachers using the shop. What I didn't know is that's not ethical. I thought, well, they're doing it, I can do it too. And nobody's saying anything, which is really cool because without that few extra bucks that I was making, and I was maintaining everything, but I was using the shop. It was later when I became administrator, I found out, and it was my own ignorance, but that hey, you probably shouldn't be doing that. I mean, you didn't pay if you have access to do something that the rest of the public doesn't have access to. Well, in Quincy, everybody had access to the shop, but if you didn't, then you probably shouldn't do that. And I didn't know that. I was just trying to make sure at the end of the month there was still food in the pantry so we could go to the next month.
Right.
So, but yeah, the shops, one in Quincy, I took it over after a guy got sick and finally passed away. He was a real icon in the community. Pretty cool guy. Never met him, obviously. But then there's a guy there named Paul Whiting, who was a football coach, and he just took me under his wing. He was just like, he was a dad. He's in his late 50s, early 60s, and he was just a beast. And he's a great football coach, but is a greater person. And so, I mean, he hired me to build stuff for his house, for he and his wife, that he taught one of the shop classes. He had one period of woods. He could have built it himself. He bought it because he knew I was starving, and he had me build stuff for him because, yeah. So had access to the shops, and ended up having to, I taught from whatever the stations are. You have to teach safety first, and you probably remember taking the shop classes.
I never took shop class.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, the trick in teaching a shop class is you have to pass the safety test 100% accuracy 100% of the time. And so you finally get down to where you're taking these tests, you have to demonstrate everything. Well, you can't do that unless you understand how the thing works or set up, and you're not going to cut kids loose on it unless you understand the tool. And if you're going to understand the tool, then you better understand what it's used for. And so these things just mushroom.
Would this shop pass the safety test?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, well, you want to put that on film? I mean, almost every tool does. It's just the operation of it, whether or not,
Right.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things you can upgrade, but, blade guards and all those things that get in your way. But if it's a kid, well, you're not getting paid by the hour. You're getting paid, or you're not getting paid by the job. You're getting paid by the hour. So slow down. Keep the splitter guard on there. Keep the blade covers on. Well, it's in my way. Yep, it is. Figure it out. At the end of the day, we're going to say fingers and toes. We got them all. It's a good day. You slow things down and you keep kids moving. But it's the thing that'll get you out of being a shop teacher eventually is the safety issue of just worrying what's going to happen to somebody. And it never happened, but I made sure things went slow enough. And then when kids are making things, your deal is you don't see this, but on the back of that project you're building, it has my name on it. So when it goes out here, people will say, oh, who taught you to build that? Now, if it's a good thing, it'll say Morgan, and I'll go, yeah, good. If it's crap, then I'm going to go, yeah, that's not leaving the shop. It's not working. If we're not doing it right, we're not doing it. So you got to slow down and make sure that everything works well and looks good and is done well, so that you don't just like, oh yeah, look at that. Who's teaching you that? No, we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be done well. And it's got to be done at the level a kid can do it.
Right.
You know, you're still talking about a 17-year-old, maybe an 18-year-old, you know.
Right. Like some kids are just not going to be into it, but some kids you're going to get that are going to be like, oh, this is cool.
So here's what I did. And I stumbled into this just like an epiphany. And it's probably true that somebody showed me this, or it was somebody else's idea. I just don't remember. What I did was I looked at what they do in mills and they do in other cabinet shops like around town. And when things get big, I set my class up like that. So there's going to be a superintendent. There's going to be somebody that's in charge. Well, that person is going to be in charge. That's a teacher. Next person down is going to be a foreman. That's going to be an advanced kid, probably a TA. And that foreman,
A kid who's
yep,
into it.
you bet, kid that's got it. It's probably your TA. It's a foreman. That foreman, I'm going to set up stations for when the bell rings. We got 10 minutes or 7 minutes to go for cleanup. So when that thing's done, either the lights are going to flash twice, or something's going to come on. Sometimes there's a bell, but it's like. That's shocking to people. So usually 2 flickers of the lights, and then the dust collection system, if it's not on, it comes on. And then the foreman's in charge of whatever we have for the cleanup chart for who's doing what. I don't release the class. The foreman does, because if this shop is not clean, he's not going to class, or she's not going to class. It's not my responsibility, it's yours. But that means you're going to get a higher grade and you have more freedoms. But you don't get somebody who's a bully or whatever, like a young man, Tom Pirtle or Sean Smith. Those are guys who I've spent a lot of time with, even and still to this day, who are guys that were my foremans, because it was like, Pirtle's about my size, maybe a little bit taller, and defensive player of the year. Tom's gonna say, hey, that's not clean. Kids are gonna go, I'll clean it. Exactly. All right, because that's what it's like in industry.
Right.
Somebody's above you and if something's not right, well, then you can give responsibilities to other kids that are a journeyman. You're not just a laborer. And so everything that I did in my classes, your grade was associated with what do you know? What do you want to learn? If you want to learn something you don't know, your pay just goes up. Why? Because you're more valuable to me as an employer. Some of the guys, Tom's done really well, but he still does this as a living. Sean Smith is a teacher, and he's a good man. He has done a lot with himself. He's a builder and a teacher, and he's just wow. And they do this stuff, and they hired kids that were in my classes, kids that I was working with for different reasons, just because they needed a break. The kid needed a break, and they'd say, "I'll give this kid a shot," kind of thing.
So last question, or I guess, so how have you liked being back in the shop? And then what'd you think of that door project that we just
These things are
finished?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how the guys, they're pro finishers. I mean, that's what they do. They paint, and it's going to be, I want to see how they do. We've done a good job prepping them and getting them to them. I mean, we really have. We've been pretty meticulous about it, but they're all rough sawn. And so we sand them to a certain level, not over sanded, not too light, pulling glue and all that stuff because of the vacuum clamped. They just make a mess, but they're cool, but they make a mess. So this project has been really fun. I mean, building the staves, building all the parts for it. I mean, it's been labor intensive, but they had all their materials, so that was just like cool. I don't think I've ever gotten this many splinters in my life, like cumulative. It's amazing. Being back in the shop, being old enough to have been retired several times, this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to start a shop. I'll just trinket things. And I think when we first met, you and I told you, at some point I'm going to do this, and maybe, I don't know, make games, do something that would keep me busy and be able to, make some things, get all my tools out of mothballs and, pull them out and put it in the garage again and do whatever. And then, offering to come down and help you when you were going to do all your resawing. I thought, I just had knee replacement. And I said, you didn't ask me. I said, hey, I know you got to do this, and that's going to be a time sucker. I could probably stand on this leg for, a couple hours. And, I'll go back on ice and whatever, and just give me a chance to get out of this bed. That'd be really cool. I'd love that. And then it's just developed into, a couple days a week, helping you out, doing different things. But it was even more than, this is kind of what my dream was, to finish everything out while I'm still able to be mobile and still lift things and move things around without, falling over myself. And that's what I wanted to do. And my kids have been saying, they just remember when I was at my most content and life was easiest for us as a family is when I was building things. And it wasn't that I was, the stuff that I've always done has been people oriented, and then, you know, people that have issues and problems, it's a lot, there's stress associated with that, you know. And so being the guy that I am, it's not simple for me to leave those things with clients. It's, you know, I usually take those things home. But here, you know, this is your client, you know, and my job is to try to give you the best I can and make sure that, you know, we're not lowering any of your criteria, any of your standards, make sure you got your reputation's intact and good. We'll be doing stuff to your standard, but it's cathartic. I mean, it allows me to get my hands on something that I'm not going to go out and compete with a guy like you with what you got going. I'm going to put out, you know, I'm going to do these cabinets. It's not going to happen. I love being here. I love doing this. You know, no real injuries. You know, smashed finger here and there, but
A lot of splinters.
yeah, a lot of I still have splinters right now. I got to get that one out. Yeah, but you know, hopefully with something else that comes up with you, we'll be off the rough zone,
Yeah.
and I'm really looking forward to see what these look like in that beautiful place with that view. I mean,
Yeah, they're going to be cool.
oh man,
For sure.
yeah, should be really cool. These are gonna look. I mean, I'm looking over your shoulder at those panels. It's just like, come on, man, that's just ridiculous. And they're beautiful. And when they're finished, however they're doing it, this belongs in some kind of cabin. It just does.
Well, I appreciate you answering some questions. It's been great to have you in the shop. I don't think I'd be halfway through those doors without you.
You're doing it on your own. Well, you work pretty hard, so you probably more than half. But
If you look at that stack of doors over there, you would not think
much
we've
work
got
it is.
way too many hours.
well, yeah, but in between all those doors, you've been building cabinets. When you're putting those together and setting the doors, I mean, we had no place to walk. You couldn't get any front of these.
Right.
You got to deliver them somewhere. This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Really good.
Well, thanks, Rowdy. I'm sure everybody
my pleasure.
appreciate the interview.